Hi guys, it's been a little while since I've made some videos. Have you missed me? Because I've missed you. The reason for that is that I've had a lot of problems with my foot again, unfortunately. I've been in a lot of pain the last couple of weeks. So I didn't really want to do videos where I'm sitting here reviewing a film. I'm not in pain, honestly. Tonight is the first time where, thankfully, all the antibiotics for my foot and all that seem to be kicking in and seem to be relatively pain free tonight, which is amazing. So yeah, back to making videos. I've really missed doing it, and I've got a whole bunch of things lined up. Anyway, so last night I watched a horror film called Tombs of the Blind Dead. It's a film which keeps coming up in discussions with you guys. A lot of you have recommended this film to me. You've recommended the entire series of films which were spawned from Tombs of the Blind Dead, and especially when we've been talking about like zombie films, it always seems to be a film which sort of comes up. Someone always throws it into the mix. So, being a fan of the undead, I really wanted to check this out. Not least because it's a film which you always see screenshots of it, or you see like the cover and on the DVDs, and the Blind Dead themselves, the sort of makeup effects and costumes are just absolutely fantastic. Really grab your attention. They look absolutely amazing. So it's always been something which has sort of piqued my interest and made me really want to check them out. I don't know why I haven't. It's just one of those things. It's a collection of films which I've just not got round to yet. But thankfully, last night I got round to the first one. So, Tombs of the Blind Dead was released in 1971. It's the first in a series of films called the Blind Dead series, directed by Armando de Osario, and it's a Spanish language film. There are two versions of it, but I'll get to that later. It's the film starts off with a girl who is sitting by a swimming pool, and she's, having a nice time, and a friend of hers recognises her and shouts her over, and they go over and they hug and they have a little bit of a reunion, and it transpires that the two of these girls went to college together. Now, one of them is at the pool with a friend who is a guy who, but they're just apparently friends. There's nothing going on between them. Now, the two of them are supposedly going on this trip across country, and they invite the other girl to go. So, right off the bat, between the there's a lot of sexual tension in this film right away. I can just say that. Now, what happens is the three of them get on a train and they're traveling through a sort of like a remote area, and eventually one of the girls, bizarrely, and I will admit it is a bit of a bizarre reaction, decides to jump off of the train. And the reason she decides to jump off the train is that she sees that the man who she's friendly with, he's becoming romantically involved with the other girl, and there's also we see a flashback to the fact that the two girls actually had a lesbian experience together, and that so this girl's like really sort of mixed up about the whole situation. So she decides to, the train's moving quite slowly, so she sort of grabs her stuff, jumps off the train, and our two friends are sort of shouting on her saying, come back, what are you doing? And she just sort of wanders off. Now, it is a bit strange. The logic of it is really strange. It's something which right away I was like, it's a bit odd. But to be fair, people in those sort of situations, when they, not that I've been in many lesbian situations, but people in those sorts of situations where they feel like they're under trauma, or they're under severe stress or panic, they do want to sort of run away from it. So maybe that's why that happens. However, she wanders through this sort of open field which is surrounded by these beautiful mountains, and the countryside here is just like it's beautiful. It's absolutely incredible. And she wanders into this old sort of abandoned town, and there's a church which is also abandoned in an old cemetery, and she sets up camp for the night there until the next day. Now, again, this is a strange thing for me, and it's one of the criticisms I would have of it. Maybe it's just me, maybe I'm just a bit of a pussy, but going into this sort of ghost town and then just sort of setting up a wee campfire in a cemetery or in a church, and just sort of getting your sleeping bag out and just quite happily sitting there reading a book and listening to some tunes. Maybe it's just me, but I would be sitting like that you know, waiting for noises. I probably wouldn't sleep a wink, to be honest, in that sort of situation if you're on your own. And I mean, I went backpacking and I was with other people, and you know, on a couple of occasions, you know, I struggled to sleep in some of the places that we ended up. So it seems a little bit far fetched to me, you know, the girl's reaction. However, what happens is, well, she's there, she hears a bell ringing. It's like as if the church bell is ringing. And lo and behold, we get to see these fantastic scenes of the dead rising from the cemetery. They then chase the girl down, and well, that's as far as I will go. It cuts away from that, and we the rest of the film really follows the other two friends as they try to find out what happened to her. And there's also a police investigation going on, and a whole bunch of other things going down. Alright, so that's really the setup. There's a whole backstory to why the dead are rising, who they are, and what I will say is that they're blind. They sort of move by hearing and listening. You know, that's how they sort of negotiate the environment and hunt down their prey. And they do look incredibly amazing in a lot of the shots in this film, because they're supposed to be old crusaders, Knights of the Templar, that sort of idea, and they've got this sort of hooded cowls, and you know, they just look absolutely fantastic, and they really do look dead. You know, like a lot of undead makeup and things like that, you know, is a little bit iffy, but you know, here it's very specific. You know, it's very individual, and I was really impressed by it. So that's the sort of setup of the film. It's I watched the Spanish version. There are two main versions, right? There's an English language version. Apparently, I didn't watch that. I watched the Spanish version because the English language version is sort of messed around with. Some bits are cut out, and there is, you know, I can understand why some of the things were cut out. Actually, there's one thing in particular which apparently was cut out of the Spanish version, which I watched, and it really is quite brutal, and it's a woman getting killed in front of her child, and the way it's done is really. I mean, the child's getting drenched in blood from her mother, as she, you know, it's quite a sort of brutal scene, and there are some other scenes in it that are quite graphic, but it's by no means torture porn or anything like that, and yeah, so there are those two versions. I watched the Spanish version. I don't know what the English version is like. You guys can let me know about that if you've watched it. You can know which version you're watching in terms of well, one's in English and one's in Spanish, but also the fact that I think the English language version has a flashback to where the blind dead come from at the beginning of the film, as opposed to later on in the film in the Spanish version. Again, what I would say about this film is it's really enjoyable. But I do think it is a case of a film which has monsters or creatures which are better than the film that they're in. There are some things which I found a little bit objectionable. There's a rape scene in the film, and you know, it's one of those things where I don't mind, you know, things like that being in films, but it just sort of felt a bit pointless in a lot of ways. It was just sort of thrown in. In fact, there was a few things that went on within the film which felt as if they were really just trying to drag out what was going on and sort of pad the film out to get it to be like sort of feature length. The performances I'm not sure about, because the version that I watched, I think, as with a lot of films from the continent, it looks as if it was recorded with no sound, and they've added the sound in later. So either way, I think either version is dubbed, you know, so the Spanish version is dubbed in Spanish, funnily enough. And yeah, I just felt like the creatures are really impressive. The blind dead are really impressive. The idea of why they're blind is quite interesting. The just as villains, they're excellent. They're really impressive and they're really individual. But there are some problems with them in themselves as well, and you'll notice it straight away. Right from the beginning, there are these shots of their hands, and it really it was a shame because what they've done is they've used these sort of withered prosthetic hands for them rather than just putting makeup on their hands, you know, and try to make them look rotten. And these things look really hokey and really cheap. At least at one point the hand moves, but a lot of time it's as if they're not even articulated. So it's like there's just these dodgy little hands hanging about, and that's a little bit laughable. And even I know people can say, oh well, it was, you know, it didn't have a big budget or anything like that. Even then, I think people would have looked at that and went, it doesn't really gel with other shots in the film where, you know, they're obviously not using them, you know. So that was a little bit iffy for me. There's a lot of sort of sexual tension in this film, and again, I don't really see much of the point of it. In a lot of ways, it didn't really drive the story. It felt more like, you know, it felt more at the beginning of the film like just a reason to break the three of them up so that one would go off, which is fair enough. But then later on, let's say there's a rape scene, there's more sort of sexual aggression later on in the film. I don't know, it just felt sort of misplaced. Like, not misplaced in terms of, if you watch a lot of films from that era, they've got them in it, you know, they've got that in it. So, like, yeah, fair enough, but just, it didn't quite work for me. Apart from that, and yeah, there's a weird sort of like mortician character as well, and I couldn't really understand the upper pathologist. It was a bit weird. Taking like enjoyment in showing, you know, relatives and next of kin and all that to like look at dead bodies to identify them and all that, and taking like glee in that, you know, was a bit weird. But I think that at least worked to a degree because it was just like, what an odd guy. There's also the whole sort of question of what, you know, is this a zombie film? Some people would call this a zombie film. I've read that the director didn't really like them being referred to as zombies. The question for me really would be, are they dead? What's the definition of a zombie? I don't know. I mean, certainly they seem to be undead, but there's a question about whether they're just ridiculously old, and that's why they look the way they do. Now, interestingly, this really made me laugh. There's the way they look, right? They look kind of, at times I can see it, they look almost like withered apes in the face. I can see that connection people made. There was actually and in fact I'll put a link below, it's on YouTube. There was an introduction made which tried to connect the series to the film, rather, to the Planet of the Apes series, and they called it Revenge of Planet Ape. And I would love to have seen that cut because I have no idea, because, you know, the voiceover at the start of the film says that it's like thousands of years in the future and all that. So I would love to see how they cut that film together, to try and explain that. You know, again, just a prime example of people just trying to make money out of something, not really caring about the fact that this is a solid horror film. You know, it's a solid horror film. I hear some of the other films are better than the first one, so I'll go and check this out. But I would definitely recommend Tombs of the Blind Dead. Really interesting villains, sort of monsters, and that's really what it hinges on. The whole film hinges on. But what I was really impressed with was the conclusion to the film. I thought the conclusion was really strong, really strong. In fact, really created a sense of tension. You know, people try to get away from these things, and you watch so many horror films where you've got these things which are more like mummies, I suppose, than zombies trying to move and get people, and you think, you know, like, just run away, you'll outrun it. But here there was a real sense of tension, and it really impressed me, and the final shot of the film really impressed me as well. So there are things to be really admired in the film, and I did like it. I just don't think it's like a masterpiece or anything like that. I just think it's solid. For what it is, it's solid, and the design of the creatures is really excellent. So that's Tombs of the Blind Dead. I nearly said on my 31 Horrors of Mike there, but no, that's been and gone. And yeah, definitely go and check it out. Got a lot more videos coming up, and I might even do some more tonight. I don't know, since I haven't made any. I've like got so many ideas for videos now because I've not really recorded anything for a little while. I hope you guys are all doing well, and let me know what you think of Tombs of the Blind Dead. You know, did you like it? Have you watched it? And yeah, I'll talk to you and stuff if I can find the off button here. My other camera went in the blink. That's fine. Never mind.